take advantage of this method even if you have a household iron. You don't have to have an easy press or a heat press or an auto press or anything fancy like that to be able to apply heat transfer vinyl or iron-on vinyl onto cards. I find that with many different heat transfer vinyls, it gives you this beautiful finish on it. It's like a matte, silky kind of thing, which I love. And iron-on vinyl also comes in so many beautiful colors and variations, so it's a lot of fun to be able to add onto cards as an extra added touch. My name is Kelly, and let's get clacking. Now, of course, most people want to use heat transfer vinyl on their cards because with HTV, and I'm going to refer to it as HTV going forward, so with HTV, you can very often get super intricate cuts that you wouldn't have been able to get with cardstock as an example, and even with vinyl, normal adhesive vinyl, those kinds of cuts are difficult to achieve. So you have a lot more flexibility with HTV, and I also find that the application method is a little bit more foolproof than putting adhesive vinyl onto a card or onto cardstock. So I'm going to just create a basic polka dot card in Cricut Design Space and show you how to apply it onto your cardstock. So in Cricut Design Space, I'm going to go to Images, and I'm just going to search for dots. Now, this first one that we have here, the dots are all lopsided, they aren't lined up. It is perfect for what I want. So I'm going to select it and add it to my canvas. Right click and duplicate because I want to be able to have a few of these. And I'm just going to rotate it a little bit so that it doesn't look patterned. Select both of those, duplicate them again, and essentially play around with the design so that I have a bunch of dots covering up a large area for my card. Now I'm just going to use the section in the middle here, but before I can create a little block out of this card, I need to make sure that all of these dots are in one layer. So I'm going to select them all, click Combine, and then click Weld. This brings them all into one layer that I can work with. Now I'm going to add a shape to my canvas, which will be the relative size of the card that I'm going to use, and I'm going to make it a square. The sizing is going to be completely off, so I'm going to change the size of the square to be a width of, let's say, 12 centimeters, and unlock the proportions so that I can change the height and make it taller. And I'm going to make the height 16 centimeters. Now that's the size of the card that I want to use. These dots are way too big. So I'm going to just shrink that a little bit so that it kind of fits around that size of the card. I want to make sure that I can see where these dots are. And I currently can't see that. So I'm going to right click on the square and send it to the back. So now I can position the dots in a way that I kind of get the most out of the space that I have. I'm going to zoom in so that I can see a little bit better what I'm working with. And it doesn't matter if you leave off a whole bunch of dots on the page, that's fine. Just playing around with whatever I feel works best for this card. There we go. I kind of like that. Maybe I'll move it a little bit more that side. So I'm going to select both of them and I'm going to click Slice. So now what we have is we've removed all of the dots on the outside that I don't need. I'm going to delete that. And now that we have sliced this out, I'm going to move the color layer out off to the side so that I know what I'm working with. And I don't need these two layers anymore. So I'm actually going to delete them. And this is what we are left with when we are going to be cutting our HTV. It's the right size and everything. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Make It in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Now, with most projects when it comes to working with HTV, you always cut into the back of the actual product. So we're cutting into the back of the vinyl, which means that everything that we cut needs to be in reverse, or it needs to be mirrored, because once we're done, we're going to flip it over and place it onto the cardstock. So if you don't mirror it, then whatever you have set up like that will then come out looking the other way around. This is especially important if you're working with words and pictures and things like that, or a design that you need to have laid out in a specific way. It's not terribly important for this one that I have, but just to make sure that I'm giving you the correct advice, I'm going to select the mirror option on the side here of the screen. I'm then going to click continue and connect to my machine. Now I need to make sure that I'm going to get the correct cut setting. Every material that you cut is different, and you need to make sure that you're getting the right pressure in order to cut through the material. So please make sure that before you've gotten to this step, you've done your test cut. We definitely don't want to cut an entire page and then the cut setting wasn't right and you've now wasted a whole bunch of your beautiful HTV. So for this particular material, I'm going to be using some fun foil sparkle IronOn, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click browse all materials and I'm going to search for sparkle. And I have cut this material several times before, and holographic sparkle IronOn works for this material. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to click done. Whenever I'm cutting IronOn or HTV, it's the same thing. I'm going to put the pressure on more. I'd rather have it cut a little bit deeper and go a little bit more into the carrier sheet of the HTV itself than have something that doesn't cut through. So that's just a little bit of a tip if you want to work with IronOn. So now what I'm going to do is load my IronOn onto a nice sticky green mat, load it into the machine and cut it out. And now that it is finished cutting, we're going to unload it from the machine and our machine work is done. I'm going to remove it from the mat. Put my mat cover back on. Very carefully trim my HTV down so that I don't cut off any section of it like I normally do. And keep my spares for another project. I am going to warm up my easy press while I'm waiting. So I'm going to make sure the heat is set to 155 and then the time is set to around 10 seconds. We don't need very long time or very high heat for this, so I'm just going to leave it at that. With IronOn, you need to take your weeding tool, dig it into the corner of the back of the product and pull that layer back. Now that you have the two separated, you don't really need to use your weeding tool at the moment, and we can just quite simply pull this part of the HTV away from the backing. Now, don't throw this away, because if you want to, you would actually be able to use this for another card. So you can have the positive and the negative and make two cards out of one. So when you place it onto your card, that's what it's going to look like. You can position this however you want it, and we can just stick it down like that. Now the heat press is warmed up. I just want to trim this down so that it lies just on the edge of my card. And you can, of course, omit this step by making it the exact right size in Design Space, but I never know which size card I'm going to use, so I like to have some options. Instead of using my Easy Press mat, I'm using a slightly sturdier silicone mat that comes with my larger heat press, as I want to be able to have the kind of strength and rigidity of this mat. My Easy Press is warmed up, but I do want to make sure that I'm using a protective sheet both underneath and on top of the card. Now this is parchment paper or silicone paper that you get with the infusible inks. I've got a lot of it, so I just use it for these. So I'm going to sandwich this in between. Now what this does is it means that if I didn't cut it correctly and there are any pieces overlapping, they won't stick to this mat underneath. That's really important because you don't want to get glue and things like that on this. And by covering it on the top, it means that you're giving an additional protective layer to the cardstock if there are any areas of the cardstock peeping out. So I'm going to press it and not really use very much pressure. We don't need much pressure at all. We just need a little bit of the heat going through. And I didn't set the time correctly, so I'm just going to give it 10 seconds. It will be hot to the touch depending on what card you have. And most of the Cricut HTVs are cold peel, so I'm just going to let it cool for a second or so while trying to keep it flat because it will want to curl. So we're just going to lift up the carrier sheet and peel that back. And we have our HTV on our card. If you do have any overlapping stragglers on the areas there, you can just cut those off. But if you would prefer to learn how to use adhesive vinyl on cardstock, check out this video here. Subscribe for more Cricut videos in the future, and remember, be kind to someone today. Thanks for watching.